Welcome to the Paul Adefarasin podcast, our interactive 15-minute review of this week's message. We revisit the word, surface the big ideas, and give you space to reflect, pray, and act. If you'd like the full message, though, you can watch it on YouTube or listen on Spotify after this episode. My name is Paul Adefarasin.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We grab the sources, cut the fluff, and deliver the intellectual shortcuts straight to you. Today, we've landed in a really fascinating space. It's provocative, actually. We're looking at the intersection of, believe it or not, 16th century theology and 21st century macroeconomics, specifically how developing nations might transform.
It is an unusual source stack, yeah. Our main source is a service message, a sermon delivered recently. It's called Arise and Build. But don't let the sermon part fool you. Its core message is, well, it's basically an economic manifesto. The speaker argues that the road to national prosperity means adopting a very specific, historical, faith-based framework for economics and morals.
Okay, let's unpack this. I mean, the boldness of the argument is what really grabbed us. It states pretty flatly that national transformation isn't mainly about politics or foreign aid. It calls it a sacred duty rooted in these moral and productive values. So the mission for you listening today is to grasp exactly how this source builds that bridge. How does a 16th century idea translate to modern GDP growth?
And the vision laid out is, well, it's not subtle at all. The speaker sets a specific quantifiable goal for Nigeria, the country referenced, calls achieving a gross domestic product per capita of $30,000 my kind of miracles.
$30,000, wow. Just to give you some context on that number, many nations in Africa right now are hovering around maybe $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 per capita, hitting $30,000. That's moving from developing status into the league of, say, Spain or Italy. That's not just reform, that's a total generational economic overhaul we're talking about.
It completely reframes national success, doesn't it? Nation building gets elevated. It's not just policy, it's one of the highest callings known to mankind, a sacred duty. And importantly, it shifts focus away from expecting some kind of instant supernatural money drop towards disciplined, productive, ethical work achievement.
Okay, so if that's the ambitious goal, where does the source say the blueprint comes from? It seems to start by looking back, right? Saying history is repeated only by men who refuse to learn. What's the key lesson from the past they're pushing?
The lesson is the Reformation. That's the core argument. The source argues Nigeria and Africa more broadly needs its own reformation, mirroring that huge societal shift in 16th century Europe, which then shaped North America. That period, the source claims, laid down the essential values: productivity, responsibility, strong nationhood. Values that eventually led the West to become, in the source's words, a model civilization based on creating lasting wealth.
That's a massive claim. And crucial to understanding it is how the speaker defines things. They make this really sharp distinction between people, country, and nation. You have to get this right.
Oh, absolutely. If you miss this distinction, you miss the whole point. A people, that's just a gathering. Simple enough, a country is the physical place, the earth and its resources, the land. But a nation, that's defined much more deeply. It's an aggregation of souls knit together by clear-cut value systems.
Yeah.
And these systems are institutionalized, regulating society, industry, education, justice. The source is emphatic. Nations are souls, not soil.
So just having oil or diamonds, a country and a bunch of people, without that shared institutionalized value system, you haven't actually built a nation. Is that it?
That's exactly it. The transformation has to happen in the soul, the collective values, before it manifests in the soil, the economy. And the conclusion they draw is powerful. A formidable nation unites around these righteous principles. It then converts its natural resources, its country, into real wealth through adding value. Only then does it become a prosperous, productive, viable country under God. The problem isn't a lack of resources, according to this source. It's a lack of that national soul.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. How do you connect that spiritual soul stuff to the economic spreadsheet? The sermon points to 4 specific economic pillars, pulled directly from Protestant Puritan doctrine. And these are presented as the essential steps to generate massive, sustainable wealth. Let's dive into those.
Right. Pillar number 1 is productivity. And it's framed as work as a divine prerogative. The theology here is key. God's first command, the source says, was be fruitful in scale. God created the raw materials, trees, earth, whatever. But humans, made in God's likeness, are meant to use their creative nature to turn that raw stuff into engineered products. You know, wood into furniture, sand into microchips, earth into technology. Work is the process of adding value and scaling it up.
That totally flips the script on how many view work, doesn't it? It's not a curse, it's a creative calling.
Precisely. If you're not productive, in this view, you're actually failing your primary purpose. Then, pillar 2, a commitment to education for all. The reformers apparently understood if you want to lift the poor, widespread education is critical, non-negotiable. It's presented almost as a simple equation. The most productive nations are the most educated. The source even points to Western Nigeria's past focus on education as a driver of prosperity.
Okay, education builds the how-to, the capacity for adding value. But pillar 3 seems to be about the trust needed to make it all work. Moral values. This sounds like it moves from the factory floor into the office, the market, everywhere.
Yeah, it demands honesty, integrity, trustworthiness, crucial for credit, for commerce. You need people to value contracts, obligations. What really stood out was the modern take on stealing. It includes stealing time from your employer.
Huh. That's surprisingly practical theology for today. Puts the responsibility right on the individual worker. Showing up late, leaving early, that's framed as theft, hindering national productivity. It shifts accountability inward, doesn't it? Not just waiting for the auditors.
It really does. It turns personal ethics into a tool for economic reform. Then the 4th pillar balances this focus on individual work, caring for the underserved. This was apparently key for the reformers dealing with the gaps left by feudalism. The church's role wasn't just charity, but providing skills, maybe low or no interest loans, empowering people, social mobility driven by the community itself.
Now, this whole 4-pillar framework, it seems to stand in stark contrast to what the source is seeing preached today in many places.
Oh, it's a direct, head-on challenge, no question. The source explicitly rejects what it calls the pervasive doctrine of miracle prosperity. Things like miracle wealth, anointing for money, waiting for instant bank alerts. And we should note, the language used is incredibly strong, suggesting these popular doctrines aren't just wrong, but actively harmful, like stage 4 cancer needing urgent removal.
Wow. Okay, and the theological basis for rejecting that miracle money idea comes down to a specific scripture.
Deuteronomy 8.18, absolutely central. That verse says God gives power to get wealth. The key word is power. The ability, the skill, the creativity to add value and produce, not the wealth itself dropped from the sky. If you just teach people to wait for a miracle alert, the source argues, they ignore the productive power God already gave them.
And this difference in philosophy has massive real-world economic consequences. The source uses a powerful example, right? The cocoa value chain.
Yes, it's a really stark illustration of failing to apply those 4 pillars. West Africa grows something like 70% of the world's cocoa beans. Huge amount. But because there's so little local processing, manufacturing, that value-add step, African countries only capture about 3% of the total value chain revenue, just 3%.
3%. So the nations that don't grow the beans, often high education, high integrity systems, they process the other 96, 97%, turning beans into chocolate, cocoa powder, liquor.
Exactly. And that global industry is worth maybe $230, $240 billion.
So billions upon billions are lost because essentially they're exporting raw beans instead of finished chocolate bars, selling the sand, not the microchip.
It shows the potential is there, but unlocking it requires embracing productivity, education, manufacturing, investment, all outcomes the source claims of those Reformation values.
Let's pivot then to section 3, because creating wealth is one thing, but keeping it from vanishing into corruption is another. How do these values translate into governance, into justice?
This is where the history gets very practical. The source connects the reformers directly to modern accountability, like John Calvin in Geneva standardizing weights and measures. Sounds small, maybe. But that stopped merchants from cheating. It built trust. It's the bedrock of consumer protection, stable markets.
Right, that standardization, that insistence on verifiable trust. That's the historical root of corporate governance, isn't it? Public accountability, enforceable contracts. Markets need that trust.
They absolutely do. So corruption, stealing public funds, bribery, graft, it has to be seen as the exception, not the norm. This mindset demands systemic integrity, not just hoping individuals will be good.
And keeping that system honest relies heavily on the rule of law. The source grounds this theologically, too.
Yes, in Deuteronomy 17, verses 18 to 20, it's maybe the most critical governance point made. That passage requires the king, the top leader, to personally write out the law and read it daily. Why? So that his heart be not lifted up above his brethren? It establishes that no one is above the law, not the president, not the ministers, nobody. It demands humility and consistent ethics from the very top, which is vital to fight systemic corruption.
Okay, so you have productivity creating wealth and the rule of law protecting it. But how does the system avoid just creating a new elite, leaving the poor behind? That's where benevolence and equity come in.
Exactly. It's that tension, isn't it, between the strong work ethic and Christian communal responsibility. The source points to Acts chapter 4, where the early church had all things in common. It uses this to argue for responsible wealth redistribution, for taking care of those in need. It highlights that distribution was made unto every man according as he had need.
So productivity makes the pie bigger, and justice and benevolence ensure it's shared fairly, maybe not equally, but fairly, preventing instability from huge wealth gaps.
That's the idea. And James 1.27 reinforces it. True religion means caring for the vulnerable, the orphans and widows. This complete ethical codework, integrity, rule of law, caring for the needy, that's what made Europe a model, the source argues. Even if some countries today have, quote, moved away from the prince but held on to the principles themselves are seen as veritable, viable, powerful, and potent, still effective.
So what does this all mean then for you listening? What's the final takeaway, the mandate? The source seems to be arguing national change isn't about waiting for some miracle. It's about deliberately implementing these historical, principled, productive values everywhere, in every part of life.
And the biggest roadblock identified is the failure at the top, the elite, in business, government, even the church. Their acceptance or participation in corruption sets the tone for everyone else. The middle class, the working person, they often just copy the example they see.
So the solution requires, what was the phrase, a violent commitment. Sounds intense.
It does, but it's defined carefully, not physical violence. It means determined, sacrificial, disciplined action, uncompromising action, and it's required from the populace, the ordinary people. The speaker calls them the governing cabinet, using the Greek word ecclesia.
Ecclesia. What's the significance of that term?
It's key. It means the called out ones, the assembly. Historically, it was the governing body in ancient Greek cities. By calling the productive, ethical citizens the ecclesia, the source is basically empowering them, giving them the authority and the responsibility to drive change, essentially bypassing the failed elites. They become the agents of this modern Reformation.
That is a profound challenge, especially given the claim that much of the gospel preached today is the opposite of this transforming message, suggesting it actually hinders national progress by teaching passivity, waiting for magic money instead of diligent work and integrity.
It forces a very personal reflection, doesn't it? If national transformation needs a return to diligence, like not stealing time at work and integrity demanding the powerful follow the law too, then the real question becomes, are you personally willing to make that violent commitment to those principles?
So the provocative thought we'll leave you with, drawing from this really intense deep dive, what practical steps of diligence and integrity can you actually commit to right now in your own sphere? Maybe it is refusing to steal time at work. Maybe it's refusing to tolerate even small acts of bribery or graft you see. Or maybe it's demanding more accountability from your local leaders. What steps can you take to start being that change agent, that part of the ecclesia, necessary for the kind of national transformation outlined in this message?
Thank you for listening. To go deeper, watch the full message on YouTube or listen to the full-length sermon on Spotify. Follow the podcast, and please share it with someone who needs it and leave your response in the Q&A. Kindly keep your heart on fire, your eyes on Jesus, knowing you are the exception. Grace and peace. We love you deeply.